You might imagine that being a medieval princess meant wearing shimmering gowns, strolling through sunlit courtyards, and having servants adjust your pillows while you contemplated which jeweled necklace best suited the afternoon. But if you were born into a royal household sometime between the 11th and 15th centuries, the reality would likely feel far less glamorous and far more constricting than the modern imagination allows. As you settle into this story, you might picture yourself here, not as a ruler, not as a warrior, but as a young girl whose life has been decided long before you took your first breath. From the beginning, your existence is not really your own. Before you are even old enough to walk, your name is already being whispered in distant courts. Someone has already speculated about the political value of your future marriage. Your cradle, likely carved from oak and draped in fabric imported at great expense, does not protect you from expectation. Every COO you make is observed, and every early sign of temperament is quietly noted. Are you timid, curious, stubborn? These qualities will determine how easily you can be shaped, as your attendants might say, into the kind of princess your family needs you to become. Your earliest memories might be of the nursery, a space where you are surrounded by the gentle hum of activity. Wet nurses wash your face with cool water each morning. A governess, often someone from a noble but not royal household, teaches you how to sit upright, how to hold a spoon, and how to remain quiet when silence is expected. The room smells faintly of beeswax polish, lavender sachets, and damp linen drying near the hearth. You hear footsteps all day, your attendants checking on you, servants bringing trays, your mother appearing only briefly, and your father almost never. The castle you grow up in is not the romantic stone fortress seen in stories. It is cold. It is drafty. In winter, icy wind slips through the arrow slits, while frost forms on the inner edges of the walls. The rushes on the floor are replaced only a few times a year, and by the time they are removed, they smell of everything from spilled ale to damp earth, to whatever your family's hunting dogs dragged inside. Smoke from the hearth never fully escapes, leaving a faint haze clinging to the ceiling beams. Though you may have luxuries, soft furs, imported fabrics, or gold-threaded embroidery, you are, in truth, trapped within those stone walls. A princess does not wander the market. She does not walk through the village. She does not run in the fields unattended. Most of what you know of the world comes filtered through your tutors or overheard conversations. You become, without intending to, a symbol rather than a person. Then comes your education. Not the kind of education that teaches you how to govern or defend yourself, but rather the instruction necessary to become someone else's asset. You learn to speak clearly, to write when parchment is available, and to embroider endlessly. You might spend hours each day crafting neat rows of stitches, your fingers pricked so often that they develop small calluses. Your governess tells you that a princess must always be graceful, composed, and patient, because patience is what keeps alliances steady and marriages stable. Other girls your age, peasant or merchant born, might spend their time outdoors, running barefoot through the grass or helping their families with chores. But you, despite being surrounded by wealth, live within a kind of emotional narrowness. Every activity is supervised, every conversation overheard. Even your laughter is a thing that must be controlled so it does not carry through the corridors in an unseemly manner. Meals provide a rare break from the monotony. You sit on a wooden bench at a long table, eating bread that is always a little too dense and meat that is sometimes too tough. Though you are royalty, your diet is not nearly as lavish as expected. Fresh vegetables are seasonal luxuries, and most dishes are flavored with whatever herbs can be grown near the castle walls. At times you are served imported spices, pepper, saffron, or cinnamon, but only in tiny amounts. Their presence on your plate is not so much for your enjoyment as a display of your family's wealth. What you do have in abundance is protocol. Before eating, you must wash your hands in a basin held by a servant. You must not raise food directly to your mouth without cutting it into appropriately sized pieces. You must not speak too loudly nor too softly. You must not let your thoughts or emotions show on your face. And you must always remember that everything you do reflects upon the dignity of your house. As you grow older, you become increasingly aware of the attention focused on you. Courtiers note your posture, your speech, your manners. They comment on how you walk through a room. They comment on the way you braid your hair. You learn that everything about you can become a topic of discussion. By the time you are 8 or 9, you are already being prepared for your eventual marriage. Your mother's ladies-in-waiting explain that a princess does not marry for love, she marries for peace, land, or influence. Your future husband's name may be mentioned casually, as though he is no more significant than the embroidery pattern on your sleeve. But the truth is that this name will one day define everything about your adult life. You may have younger siblings, brothers who train with wooden swords in the courtyard. Their days are filled with activity, learning strategy, riding horses, and practicing the skills expected of future kings or knights. Your days, by comparison, revolve around obedience and presentation. When you watch your brothers gallop across the training field, their cloaks streaking behind them, their faces flushed with energy, you cannot help but feel a quiet envy. But you have been taught not to express such longings. A princess does not climb trees. A princess does not ride without permission. A princess does not participate in anything that might cause injury. Your body is not entirely your own. It is a vessel for future alliances. Still, there are small joys, moments easily overlooked by historians but deeply felt by anyone who lived through them. You might find comfort in the warmth of the kitchen hearth, where the cooks sometimes allow you to taste dough or chew on pieces of dried fruit. You might enjoy the sound of rain against the shutters or the rare afternoons when your tutor reads to you from romances or moral stories. Tales of distant lands you will never visit except through marriage. And perhaps there is a lady in waiting who treats you with genuine affection, someone who brushes your hair gently and sneaks you little bits of honeycomb when no one is watching. These quiet moments alleviate the rigid structure of your day, but they do not eliminate the pressure. As you enter adolescence, the scrutiny intensifies. You are expected to demonstrate modesty, diligence, and unwavering decorum. Your education expands to include the management of household affairs, not for your own home, but for the estate of whatever nobleman you will one day marry. You must learn how to oversee servants, how to balance accounts, and how to ensure that the stores of grain and ale are managed properly. By 14 or 15, you are considered marriageable. You may not feel prepared, most do not, but your opinions matter very little. You are told to trust your parents, trust your king, trust the council. A marriage proposal is not something you anticipate with excitement. It is something that simply arrives, carried by an envoy who bows before your father and presents letters sealed in wax. The details of your future, your home, your duties, your husband, might be decided in a single afternoon, as you sit in your chamber, listening to the muffled voices from the great hall below. You realize that your life is shifting in a direction you cannot control. You do not yet know what kind of man your future husband will be. You do not know whether his court welcome you kindly or treat you with suspicion. You do not know how far from home you will be sent. And yet, despite all these uncertainties, the decision will be made for you. But before your marriage is arranged, there is still more to understand about the world you inhabit, its customs, its dangers, and the small overlooked details that make up the daily existence of a medieval princess. And so you might ask yourself quietly, as you listen to the footsteps approaching your chamber door, you stand at the edge of adolescence. But in the medieval world, that word, adolescence, is not truly recognized. You are no longer a child in the eyes of those around you, and yet you are far from being considered an adult. Instead, you exist in a liminal space where expectations grow heavier while your freedom remains limited. It is in this in-between period that a medieval princess learns the quiet arts of survival, not the dramatic kind associated with legends and ballads, but the subtle, painstaking skills that allow her to navigate a world built on hierarchy, duty, and the unspoken rules of court life. Your tutors play a critical role in this transition. Years, you have been taught to read passages from the Bible or from moral treatises written long before your birth. Now, the lessons grow more complex. You learn how to decipher letters and formal documents, not so you may write freely, but so you may understand the communications sent between courts. You learn to use formal greetings, to craft responses with delicately measured phrasing, and to avoid any wording that could be interpreted as too familiar or too cold. Every line of ink you put upon parchment carries the weight of your family's reputation. Your handwriting becomes smoother with time, though the quill still blots ink when you press too hard. The parchment is expensive, and mistakes are frowned upon. Your tutor sometimes places a practice sheet on the table and has you trace letters for hours, not lifting your wrist too high, not letting your fingers tremble. You feel your neck grow stiff, but you learn not to complain. Complaints, you are told, create noise. Noise draws attention, and attention for a princess is rarely a gift. You also learn the languages you are expected to speak fluently. Latin is essential, though rarely spoken in conversation. It lives on the tongue of priests, scribes, and legal scholars. You might learn French, especially if you live in England or Western Europe, for French is the language of diplomacy and aristocracy. If your family expects you to marry into a regional court, perhaps in the Low Countries, Iberia, or the Holy Roman Empire, you may be taught a few words from their dialects too, not to speak with confidence, but to greet your future in-laws in their own style, showing respect and humility. Your lessons, though quiet and restrained, build a type of mental stamina. You learn to read human expressions as carefully as you read words on a page. You learn when to remain silent, when to smile politely, and when to lower your gaze in deference. These skills will serve you well, not only in court politics, but also in the private chambers where alliances are formed and tested. Beyond your scholarly lessons, you begin to train in the domestic arts expected of noblewomen. Embroidery remains a constant companion. You might embroider scenes from the Bible, floral borders, or heraldic symbols. It is not unusual for a princess to spend an entire season working on a single tapestry panel. This work is detailed, repetitive, and, if you allow it, the kind of task that can lull you into an almost meditative state. You also learn the management of a household, though you rarely engage with the actual labor. Instead, you are taught principles. How many servants should staff a chamber? How much grain is needed for the winter? How to evaluate the quality of cloth or bread or ale? You learn the importance of maintaining order, of keeping accounts, and of ensuring that nothing in the household falls into disrepair. A well-run home, you are told, reflects the competence of its mistress. Occasionally, your lessons take you outside the castle's inner rooms. You might be escorted to observe the herb garden, where the healer tends to medicinal plants, sage for sore throats, mint for digestion, lavender for sleep, and comfrey for bruises. You learn the uses of each plant, not because you will prepare remedies yourself, but because you must understand the basics of keeping a household healthy. Illness is ever present in the medieval world, and even a princess is not immune to the spread of fevers, respiratory ailments, or infections carried by unclean water. Your own health becomes a matter of great concern. You are monitored for signs of weakness or fatigue. If you fall ill, the healer offers remedies that may or may not provide relief. Honey mixed with herbs, warm poultices, broths simmered for hours, sumped. You are given prayers to recite or relics to keep at your bedside. And though you may recover, the experience reminds you of your vulnerability. Royal blood is no shield against disease. During these years, you also witness the politics of your family more clearly. You hear names discussed in hushed tones, rival nobles, neighboring kings, potential suitors. When an emissary visits, you observe the formality of the greeting, the exchange of gifts, the calculated politeness. Sometimes the emissary brings news of war or strained alliances. Other times, the news involves you. A marriage proposal might be hinted at, though rarely spoken aloud in your presence, until negotiations are near completion. You learn, slowly and through observation, that alliances are fragile things. A misplaced word, an insult, a refusal to cooperate. Any of these could sever relationships built over generations. You also learn that your own future could ease tensions or ignite them, depending on how the negotiations unfold. The expectations placed upon your behavior grow increasingly strict. A princess cannot afford to display anger. Anger suggests volatility, and volatility is dangerous in a figure meant to symbolize harmony. A princess cannot appear overly joyful either, for joy can be interpreted as frivolous or childish. Instead, you cultivate a serene expression, one of calm composure. You smile when necessary, but not excessively. You maintain a posture that is dignified but not stiff. These are not trivial habits. They are part of the role you are expected to embody. As your appearance becomes scrutinized, your clothing also changes. Your gowns grow heavier and more elaborate. They are adorned with embroidery, fur trim, or decorative sleeves. You might find these garments beautiful, but they are not comfortable. The weight of the fabric restricts your movement, and the layers trap here. Tea in the summer and offer little warmth in the winter. You learn to walk slowly, so the hem does not catch on the stone floor. You learn to sit in a way that keeps the folds arranged neatly, always prepared for the gaze of observers. Your hair becomes another symbol of status. Long hair is a sign of purity and grace, and you are expected to maintain it meticulously. Your ladies braid it, twist it, or cover it with veils and circlets, depending on the occasion. Washing your hair is infrequent due to the cold water and limited bathing habits of the era, so herbs or scented oils are often used to keep it manageable. During feast days or celebrations, you are displayed more publicly. The great hall fills with nobles, musicians, and servants. Long wooden tables are arranged with trenchers, pitchers of ale, and plates of roasted meat. You sit at the high table beside your parents, your posture perfect, your expression neutral. You listen to minstrels perform songs about heroes and battles, even though your own life feels far removed from such stories. You observe the movement of courtiers, who speaks to whom, who lingers near your father, who avoids eye contact. You become skilled at recognizing strangers' motives simply by watching how they carry themselves. There are moments when you are asked to participate in diplomacy. You may present a small gift to visiting nobles, a piece of embroidery, a book copied in your hand, or a delicately woven ribbon. These gestures symbolize your family's goodwill, but you also know they serve another purpose: to display your refinement, your usefulness, and your eligibility. Marriage negotiations intensify as you approach your mid-teens. You hear fragments of conversations, mentions of dowries, land rights, bloodlines, and alliances. You try to imagine the man you will marry, though you are given very few details. A name, perhaps. A regi. On. An age. Rarely more. Your mother may sit with you and explain your future duties. She might tell you that marriage for a princess is an act of service to her family and her people. She reminds you that your conduct will shape how your new household views your homeland. You nod, understanding the weight but not yet able to carry it. When negotiations grow close to completion, you are summoned to meet envoys from the prospective groom's family. They observe you carefully, your posture, your voice, your manners. You speak little, not wanting to say anything that might reflect poorly on your kin. You feel the pressure of unspoken judgment, knowing that your fate may hinge on impressions formed within a few brief minutes. Despite this, you maintain composure. A princess must always appear composed. As the agreement nears its final stage, preparations begin, not for the wedding itself, but for your departure. You learn about the region where you will live, its climate, its customs, its political factions. You learn the names of the noble families who hold influence there. You learn the history of their conflicts and alliances. These lessons are meant to prepare you, but they also remind you that you are leaving behind everything familiar. Your household begins assembling your bridal trousseau: gowns, linens, personal items, embroidered cloths you have worked on for years, jewelry passed down from previous queens, items you will take with you to symbolize the union of your two families. Each object is carefully selected and placed in chests that will accompany you to your new home. You might feel a growing unease. You might ask yourself quietly, when no one can hear, whether the life awaiting you will be kind or harsh. But you do not voice these fears. A princess does not voice uncertainty. Even as preparations continue, another set of lessons emerges: the subtle art of influence. Older women at court, your mother, her closest ladies, or the wives of trusted nobles, teach you how to offer counsel without appearing forceful. They teach you how to observe your husband's moods, how to navigate his relationships with other nobles, and how to maintain peace within your household. You will not wield political power openly, but you are expected to guide, advise, and soften tensions. This, too, is a form of duty. At night, as you sit near the window, Watching the torches flicker along the walls of the courtyard, you reflect on your childhood, the quiet nursery, the controlled laughter, the unending lessons. You realize that everything you have learned has been leading toward this moment, the moment when you will step beyond the castle walls and into a world where every action carries consequences far greater than those of your youth. But despite this preparation, there is still one crucial question lingering in your mind. A question that no tutor, no courtier, and no royal decree can answer for you. The day of departure arrives quietly, without the fanfare of a festival you might imagine from romanticized tales. Your belongings, carefully packed over weeks, are stacked in chests and loaded onto wagons. Servants bustle around the courtyard, making last-minute adjustments to the straps on your gown or the padding beneath your feet. The castle itself seems to sense your absence. Corridors that once echoed with your laughter or the careful shuffle of your slippers now feel emptier. Even the sun seems reluctant to shine too brightly on the day you leave, casting long, muted shadows across the stone walls. You climb into the carriage, your heart weighted with anticipation, fear, and the faint thrill of finally stepping into the world outside your family's immediate control. The wheels creak as they roll over uneven roads, jolting your body gentle. But persistently. Outside the carriage, the familiar walls, the well-worn courtyards, and the faces of those who cared for you fade slowly from view. For the first time, you recognize that the world you knew, the only world you knew, is gone. The journey is long and often uncomfortable. Roads are dusty or muddy depending on the season, and the weather rarely cooperates. You sit in silence, observing the countryside through the small windows of your carriage. Rolling hills, scattered villages, grazing livestock, and distant forests pass in a blur. Servants follow on foot or horseback, attending to the horses, the wagons, and your personal needs. Each stop along the way is a reminder that the world outside the castle is not designed for comfort. Inns are crude and often overcrowded. Food is simple and irregular. You learn quickly that the life of a traveling princess is less about ease and more about endurance. Your education, rigorous though it was, is tested in real time. Every interaction along the road, from peasants bowing as you pass, to local officials seeking favors or exchanging courtesies, is an exercise in diplomacy. You must remember the lessons of composure, politeness, and observation. A wrong word, a misplaced glance, or even an unguarded expression could signal disrespect to your escort, or worse, to the communities through which you travel. Finally, after days or weeks, you reach the court of your future husband. The first impressions are critical. Your reception is orchestrated with meticulous care. Banners are hung, rooms are cleaned and scented, musicians play softly, and nobles gather to assess your presence. This moment, carefully choreographed and laden with expectation, makes your previous training suddenly concrete. Your posture, your voice, your gaze, all are under scrutiny. Every smile must be measured, every gesture precise. You have been omed for this display, yet the pressure is nothing short of overwhelming. Your husband may be present, or you may meet him later, but the court around him has already formed opinions. Some may greet you warmly, others with subtle suspicion, evaluating whether you will adapt to their rules, their rituals, and their hierarchy. You understand that this reception is not about friendship. It is a trial of patience, diplomacy, and strategic observation. You begin to notice the small details, which nobles are allied, who avoids eye contact, who lingers near the throne, and how gossip circulates almost instantly. The days that follow are repetitive and demanding, and often physically uncomfortable. Your new household requires constant attention. You may have servants assigned to your personal needs, but you also bear responsibility for overseeing tasks that you did not perform in your childhood. Managing linen, supervising kitchens, arranging deliveries, and ensuring that every member of the household knows and fulfills their duties. You are expected to resolve disputes quietly, maintain decorum among staff and nobility alike, and ensure that no disharmony undermines the court's stability. Even more taxing is the subtle political navigation required. You observe your husband's interactions with his council, his advisors, and visiting dignitaries. You are learning not only the hierarchy of power, but also the unspoken currents of influence. A well-timed compliment, a discreet word to the right noble, or a carefully measured silence can alter relationships subtly but decisively. You understand, perhaps better than anyone else in the household, that your survival depends not on force, but on perception and careful judgment. You begin to notice other challenges too. Illness is a constant threat. Water is not always safe. Food may be spoiled, and exposure to cold or wet condition is unavoidable. You recall the lessons learned in your childhood about herbal remedies and hygiene, and you apply them cautiously. But some factors remain beyond your control. An epidemic sweeping through a nearby village, an injured servant unable to recover, a sudden shortage of grain. The same vulnerabilities you learned about in your youth now have higher stakes for the well-being of your household, and by extension, your husband's position depends on your vigilance. Your personal life is, by contrast, constrained and regimented. Privacy is minimal, and intimacy with your husband is guided by custom, often with little attention to personal preference. You are instructed in matters of marriage, but these lessons are factual, unemotional, and imbued with duty. Personal affection may develop over time, or it may not. Regardless, the court expects you to maintain decorum and fulfill obligations, both public and private. Love, if it emerges, is a luxury, not a prerequisite. Despite the challenges, you begin to notice small victories, subtle ways in which you assert influence. Perhaps a servant begins to respect your judgment and executes tasks with care, or a visiting noble takes your advice in a minor negotiation. These are quiet triumphs, often invisible to the casual observer, but they are proof that your careful preparation, the hours of study, embroidery, observation, and discipline, has practical value. You are not merely a decorative figure, you are a participant in the ongoing operation of your new household. Seasons pass, and the initial anxiety of leaving home slowly transforms into routine. You learn the rhythms of the court, the sequence of meals, the timing of audiences, the rotation of duties among staff, the cadence of festivals and religious observances, even the seemingly mundane details, how to keep the candles burning evenly, how to regulate the tea, temperature in chambers, how to maintain clothing in good condition, become part of your accumulated knowledge, skills that serve as tools of survival in a structured but demanding environment. Yet, despite adaptation and the acquisition of new skills, there remains an underlying tension. You are always aware that your position is contingent. A single misstep in behavior, a momentary lapse in judgment, or an alliance gone awry could destabilize your role. This knowledge fosters resilience, patience, and a quiet, almost invisible strength. You have learned to endure, not through physical power, but through observation, caution, and steady, calculated engagement with the world around you. Perhaps the most enduring lesson is the understanding of impermanence. You realize that your childhood, your home, and even your parents' authority are now memories rather than immediate realities. The life you've been thrust into is shaped by necessity, duty, and the unrelenting pressures of lineage. You comprehend, in a way only a medieval princess could, that survival is less about glamour or comfort and more about discipline, endurance, and the ability to navigate invisible currents of expectation. And yet, in the quiet moments, alone in your chamber, or looking across the courtyard at the flickering torchlight, you sometimes wonder whether the trade-offs were worth it. You consider the freedom you lost, the experiences you were denied, and the life you might have had you been born into a different station. But these thoughts are private, unspoken, and carry no power to alter your circumstances. They exist as reminders that even royalty, with all its trappings, lives under constraints and demands that few outsiders can comprehend. By the end of your first year in the new court, you've learned something essential. Life as a medieval princess is a balancing act. Every action carries consequence. Every word is noted. Every gesture is interpreted. Your survival depends less on courage or skill than on endurance, observation, and the cultivation of a steady, patient composure. You realize that the true art of being a princess is not in public spectacle or dramatic heroism, but in the quiet, persistent ability to endure, adapt, and influence from within the confines of expectation. And as you look ahead to the next years of continued learning, negotiation, and adaptation, you understand a deeper truth. Your role and the lessons you have learned are not only about personal survival, but about the slow, often invisible shaping of history itself. Through the careful maintenance of relationships, the measured execution of duties, and the quiet application of influence, you contribute to the stability and continuity of the world around you. Your daily endurance, though invisible in the grand chronicles of kings and battles, forms the foundation for alliances, peace, and social cohesion that historians centuries later may only glance at in passing. And so, as you sit by the window and watch the moonlight glinting off the stone walls of your new home, you might ponder quietly, almost without expectation of an answer. You step through the heavy wooden gates of the legionary camp, feeling the firm ground under your sandals, and noticing how the scent of the place is a mixture of earth, sweat, and the smoke of cooking fires. The first thing that strikes you is order. Everything in the camp has its place. Rows of tents or wooden barracks are aligned with precision, forming streets rather than random clusters. The camp is essentially a small town, constructed with military efficiency in mind, and you realize immediately that your time here will be governed by rules, patterns, and routines designed for survival, discipline, and the maintenance of the empire. Even before the day begins, there is the sound of footsteps. Soldiers moving from tent to tent, officers inspecting equipment, and the occasional clatter of a wagon carrying supplies. A centurion, recognizable by his transverse crest helmet, moves briskly through the camp, ensuring that every man is in his assigned location. You notice the way his eyes sweep over the soldiers, assessing not just their readiness but their demeanor, their posture, their expressions. In this world, nothing is accidental, and discipline is a constant expectation. Your own arrival has been noted. Perhaps you are a visitor, a scribe, or a junior officer newly assigned to the camp, but your place within this system is clear. Follow the routine, observe, and adapt. The Legion operates like a machine. Each part, from the grunts who dig trenches to the officers who command formations, contributes to its functioning. To survive and thrive, you must understand the rhythms of this machine, its schedules, its hierarchies, and its expectations. Morning begins early. Before dawn, you hear the bugle or cornu signal the start of the day. Soldiers rise from their simple bedding, often straw mattresses on wooden frames, pull on their tunics, and assemble in the open space before their barracks. The centurion calls the roll, counting every man meticulously. Attendance is not merely administrative, it is a matter of life and death. Missing soldiers could compromise the camp's defenses, its construction projects, or its ability to respond to sudden threats. Breakfast is functional, not indulgent. Soldiers eat pulse, a type of porridge made from grains, sometimes mixed with vegetables or cheese. Meat is rare, reserved for special occasions or when hunting parties return with game. Bread is baked in communal ovens, and the smell of warm loaves mingles with the faint stench of animals kept near the periphery of the camp. Water is drawn from nearby wells, filtered crudely through cloth and rationed carefully. You notice the methodical way each man eats, washing his utensils, cleaning his hands in the basin provided, and returning quickly to formations. Every movement is part of a rhythm that has evolved for efficiency. Training follows breakfast. Soldiers gather in the parade ground, the dirt compacted from countless drills ready to practice maneuvers that, while repetitive, are essential for survival in battle. You watch as they drill with spears, swords, and shields, moving in precise formations. Each man learns to trust his comrades, to anticipate movements, and to respond to signals instantaneously. At first, the patterns seem monotonous: step, thrust, pivot, shield up. But you quickly realize that these routines are the foundation of the Legion's strength. The repetition is not boredom, it is preparation. It is the slow, unglamorous work of survival in a world where the unexpected can arrive at any moment. You notice the attention to equipment. Shields are scrubbed until they gleam faintly in the sunlight. Swords are sharpened daily, and armor is inspected for dents, rust, or loose rivets. The meticulous care given to these objects might seem obsessive, but in the moment of battle, such details can mean the difference between life and death. The centurion circulates among the ranks, correcting posture, adjusting helmet straps, and occasionally delivering short, sharp reprimands. Discipline is not cruelty, it is a protective mechanism. Order in daily life translates directly to effectiveness on the battlefield. By mid-morning, the focus shifts to construction and camp maintenance. You watch soldiers dig trenches along the perimeter, fortify wooden palisades, and inspect the surrounding terrain. Horses are groomed and stabled, wagons checked, and stores inventoried. The Legion is not merely a fighting force, it is a self-sustaining community capable of operating independently for weeks or months in foreign territory. Soldiers understand the necessity of these mundane tasks. A poorly maintained wall or an overlooked stockpile could compromise their survival. Again, what seems tedious is in fact critical. Lunch is brief. Leftovers from breakfast are often supplemented with dried fruit or salted meat. Meals are eaten quickly, without ceremony. Conversations are functional, exchanging information, reporting issues, or commenting briefly on the weather. Even in these moments, hierarchy is maintained. Soldiers defer to centurions and tribunes, who in turn follow orders from higher-ranking officers. You notice that respect is earned as much by attention to detail and reliability as by strength or aggression. A soldier who fails at a minor task may find his errors magnified in the eyes of superiors. The afternoon often involves specialized duties. Some men are sent on scouting missions, traveling along nearby roads or terrain to assess threats or locate resources. Others work in the smithy, repairing tools and weapons. Still others assist the camp's cooks, preparing food for large groups or managing storage facilities. You see how these roles interconnect, each contributing to the smooth operation of the Legion. A misstep in any area could cascade into larger problems, so men are trained not just in combat, but in the careful execution of all necessary tasks. Observation becomes a critical skill for anyone living in the camp. You note the interactions among soldiers, subtle gestures of camaraderie, quiet disputes over minor grievances, and the careful balancing of alliances within the ranks. Gossip travels quickly, and rumors about distant campaigns or supply issues spread almost as efficiently as official orders. To survive socially as well as physically, you must learn which conversations to engage in, which to ignore, and which to report. Even the seemingly mundane details of relationships, who speaks to whom, who holds grudges, who is trusted, carry weight. By evening, the camp settles into a slower pace. Fires are lit in designated areas, and the smell of roasted vegetables, grains, and occasionally meat fills the air. Soldiers eat their evening meal with a sense of routine and necessity. Afterward, some gather quietly to write letters, mend clothing, or simply rest. You may take this time to walk through the rows of tents and barracks, noticing how each space is personalized with small items. A soldier's cloak hung neatly, a carved figurine from home, or a patchwork quilt used to cover a bed. These little details reveal the human side of the Legion, the ways men maintain a sense of identity amid the strict structures imposed upon them. Night brings a different kind of order. Guards are posted at the gates, patrols circulate the perimeter, and the central watchtower is manned. Even while the camp sleeps, there is vigilance. Fires are maintained, animals checked, and traps inspected. You may lie awake in your assigned quarters, listening to distant snoring, the shuffle of boots on dirt, or the occasional whistle from a sentry. The Legion never truly rests. Survival requires constant attention. As you grow accustomed to life in the camp, you begin to appreciate its rhythms, the way repeated actions create security, the way discipline reduces chaos, the way minor tasks, repeated day after day, contribute to the Legion's overall effectiveness. You notice the resilience required to maintain this routine, especially in harsh weather, during supply shortages, or when the threat of attack lingers on the horizon. The soldiers' strength lies not only in their weapons, but in their ability to endure long days filled with repetition, labor, and careful attention to detail. And yet, despite the structure, the predictability, and the monotony, there is an underlying tension. The Legion operates in a world where violence could erupt at any moment. A misjudged patrol, a delayed repair, or a missed signal could prove fatal. While the daily life of the camp may seem repetitive, every task, every drill, and every observation carries the weight of potential consequence. Survival is never guaranteed, even in a tightly controlled environment. As you lie in your cot that first night, listening to the subtle hum of the camp, the soft clatter of armor, the murmur of conversation, the distant howl of a wolf, you realize that the most important lesson of all is patience. Life in a Roman legion camp is less about grand heroics or battlefield glory than about endurance, meticulous attention to duty, and the ability to observe, adapt, and respond to the slow accumulation of experience. Here, survival is achieved through repetition, routine, and quiet attentiveness, not dramatic action. And as you drift towards sleep, surrounded by the scents, sounds, and subtle rhythms of the camp, one question lingers at the edge of your mind, the kind that will accompany you through the coming days and campaigns. The first days in the legionary camp teach you more than you could have anticipated. You begin to understand that survival and effectiveness in a Roman camp are not determined solely by courage or strength, but by your ability to adhere to routines, observe the subtle hierarchies, and execute tasks precisely. By now, the early thrill of arrival has faded, replaced with a recognition of how unrelenting the pace and expectations are. Morning begins predictably. Dawn is not gentle, the bugle or cornu awakens everyone, followed by the measured shouts of centurions. Soldiers rise prompt, lie, dressing in tunics, securing belts and preparing armor for inspection. You notice the precision with which they move. Each motion is purposeful, repeated countless times, honed through both training and necessity. Discipline is instilled not only through orders but through repetition. What may seem monotonous is, in fact, the foundation for survival. After roll call, you begin to notice the sheer labor required to maintain the camp. Soldiers dig trenches, repair palisades, and construct new fortifications with the regularity of a heartbeat. Shovels scratch through dirt that sometimes resists your every movement, hauling wheelbarrows of earth to build embankments. The work is physically exhausting, but it is the essential infrastructure that protects the legion from surprise attacks. You quickly learn that in the camp, survival is not decided only by battlefield skill, but by the diligence invested in these ordinary, repetitive tasks. At the same time, the meticulous care of equipment becomes increasingly important. Weapons are sharpened until their edges glint faintly in the sunlight. Helmets and breastplates are polished until fingerprints stand out like faint smudges. You observe soldiers using oil, cloth, and steady hands to maintain their armor, all under the watchful eye of centurions. Even minor neglect can compromise both individual and collective safety. A shield with a loose strap or a rusted sword can determine life or death during combat. You realize that these repetitive, seemingly tedious tasks are essential, not ornamental, not ceremonial, but fundamentally practical. Food preparation is another facet of camp life that demands attention. You see soldiers assigned to the kitchens, stirring vast cauldrons of pulse, chopping vegetables, or tending to meat roasting over open fires. Meals are functional, providing energy more than pleasure, and supplies must be rationed carefully. You note the careful accounting: who receives extra grain, who has been away on patrol, what must be conserved for the next day. The rhythm of consumption mirrors the rhythm of labor, methodical, predictable, and essential. Observation is an education of its own. The way soldiers interact, the subtleties of rank, and the microdynamics of personal alliances are all under constant scrutiny. A soldier who falters may receive immediate correction, often public, demonstrating consequences and reinforcing the collective discipline. You realize that social survival, knowing when to speak, when to defer, when to take initiative, is as vital as physical endurance. Observing these patterns becomes almost a science: who listens to whom, who challenges authority discreetly, and who is silently influential among peers. Afternoons bring more variety, though nothing here could be described as leisurely. Soldiers may be sent to scout nearby terrain, repair roads, or manage the animals that provide transport and food. Some assist in maintaining weapons or clothing, while others monitor the distribution of supplies. You notice that the Legion operates like a microcosm of a small city. Every function, no matter how minor, is interdependent. The meticulous execution of seemingly mundane tasks ensures both comfort and survival. A mismanaged ration or a neglected repair could ripple through the camp, undermining morale and readiness. By now, you also begin to see the subtleties of leadership. Centurions and tribunes move through the camp with practiced efficiency, issuing orders that are concise, clear, and immediately actionable. Their authority is not maintained through fear alone, but through consistent enforcement of rules, attentiveness to detail, and the quiet observation of every soldier's behavior. A good centurion ensures that the camp operates smooth. And you see that the discipline cultivated in these daily routines is what allows an army to survive and conquer far from home. Yet the repetitive nature of the work is not without its mental strain. Soldiers develop ways to cope with boredom and monotony, forming small routines or rituals that structure the day. Some practice brief exercises repeatedly, sharpening their reflexes and endurance. Others engage in quiet competitions of skill, testing marksmanship or footwork. You notice the subtle ways in which these minor activities contribute to morale and mental resilience. In the absence of constant drama, it is these small, repetitive achievements that sustain the spirit. You also observe interactions during downtime. Evenings, after the final meals are prepared and eaten, offer moments of quiet reflection. Some soldiers write letters home, tracing familiar hands on parchment. Others repair garments or polish small items of equipment. Still others quietly share stories of past campaigns, their tone measured and often understated. The exchange of knowledge, experience, and advice is careful, reflecting both the necessity of preparedness and the importance of trust within the ranks. Here too, survival is as much about observation and learning as it is about physical skill. Occasionally, you encounter situations that test the very routines you have observed. A sudden storm can flood parts of the camp, damaging trenches and forcing soldiers to divert attention from training to repair work. A supply shortage requires careful reallocation of rations, testing both logistical planning and patience. The unexpected is never completely absent, and the capacity to respond quickly, methodically, and without panic becomes a silent measure of competence. You realize that the Legion thrives not because of dramatic heroics, but because of its ability to maintain calm, table behavior amid uncertainty. At night, the rhythm shifts once again. Fires are kept burning at intervals to maintain warmth and visibility. Guards patrol the perimeter, their footsteps echoing on the packed dirt. Sentinels scan the darkness, alert for any sign of intrusion. Even while most of the camp rests, the work of vigilance continues. Sleep is a luxury measured in hours, and awareness of the surrounding world remains essential. You may lie in your cot, listening to the soft shuffling of feet, the murmur of conversation, or the distant howl of animals outside the palisades. Each sound reminds you that safety is never absolute, only carefully managed through diligence and attention. You begin to understand that life in the camp is a delicate balance between routine and vigilance, monotony and readiness. Success is measured not in bold gestures or heroic conquests, but in the quiet, persistent ability to maintain structure, enforce rules, and respond efficiently to small threats before they escalate into disasters. Every day is both a rehearsal and a test. The drills, the chores, the inspections, all are training for situations that may never arrive, yet their importance is indisputable. As the days turn into weeks, you start to notice subtle rewards for consistency. Soldiers who execute their duties with care gain quiet respect from peers. Centurions take note of reliability, often granting minor responsibilities that test initiative within established boundaries. You realize that influence within the camp is earned gradually through attentiveness, patience, and steady adherence to expectations. The mundane tasks, repeated endlessly, accumulate into a kind of authority that is invisible but effective. And yet, despite the discipline, structure, and interwoven routines, there is a persistent tension that cannot be eliminated. The Legion exists in a world where danger is always possible. Raiding parties, hostile tribes, disease or accidents can disrupt the carefully maintained order. Your mental endurance is tested as consistently as your physical one. The camp functions because every individual contributes to a system larger than themselves, yet the smallest failure can have cascading consequences. You understand, slowly, that survival is not guaranteed by valor or bravery alone, but by meticulous, consistent engagement with the machinery of daily life. And so, as the evening settles and the last guards resume their watch, you might find yourself reflecting on the peculiar rhythm of this existence, its repetition, its tedium, and its quiet significance. You see clearly now that the legionary life is a study in endurance, discipline, and careful attention to detail. Here, the most important victories are often invisible. The repaired palisade, the sharpened sword, the soldier who completes his duties without error. The grand tales of conquest may dominate the history books, but the steady, unglamorous labor of the camp sustains the empire itself. Time in the legionary camp becomes measured not by calendars or holidays, but by routine, repetition, and the steady accumulation of tasks performed with care. As weeks stretch into months, you begin to feel the rhythm of camp life deep in your bones. You rise when the bugle signals dawn, move with precision through drills, attend to the maintenance of weapons and walls, participate in meals that are practical rather than indulgent, and retire at night to a cot that offers little comfort, but a predictable sense of security. In this predictability lies a form of mastery, subtle, quiet, and often invisible. By now, the initial discomforts, the scratchy tunics, the heavy armor, the cold mornings, and the dust-laden roads have become less of a shock. You have learned, almost without conscious thought, the sequence of movements required to function efficiently within the camp. You notice that soldiers who resist or fail to adapt often struggle, while those who embrace repetition, attention to detail, and patience flourish. The camp structure, rigid as it may appear, is in fact a framework that protects its members, enabling them to survive in potentially hostile territory. Your awareness of hierarchy has deepened. You understand the subtle gradations of authority, centurions who command by example and vigilance, tribunes who oversee larger operations, and legionaries who maintain the essential groundwork. Respect is not granted automatically, it is earned through reliability, competence, and the careful execution of assigned tasks. The lessons you absorbed in the early days, observation, patience, attentiveness, become invaluable, allowing you to navigate both interpersonal dynamics and the broader organizational structure. The physical labor, though still exhausting, now serves a dual purpose. Beyond maintaining defenses and infrastructure, it reinforces a mindset of endurance. Each trench dug, each palisade reinforced, each weapon polished is a tangible contribution to collective safety. You realize that this labor is not punishment or mere routine. It is preparation. It is the slow, deliberate cultivation of resilience. In the repetitive grind, you begin to appreciate that survival is rarely dramatic. It is earned incrementally through steady effort and careful attention to detail. You also notice the social dynamics at play. Soldiers form subtle alliances, negotiate favors quietly, and share information selectively. Observing these interactions becomes as important as participating in drills. To function successfully, you must learn to read unspoken cues, anticipate needs, and avoid entanglement in disputes that could compromise your standing. Even minor errors in judgment, if repeated, may erode trust and influence. In a place where lives depend on reliability, attention to detail, and mutual respect, these small social skills are vital. Meals continue to be utilitarian, but you learn to appreciate their role in maintaining the body and spirit. The daily rhythm of eating, washing, and returning to duties becomes a comforting constant in an environment otherwise defined by unpredictability. You notice the care with which provisions are rationed and stored, the diligence of cooks in preparing vast quantities of food, and the quiet efficiency of soldiers in distributing meals. The practical lessons of sustenance and resource management become inseparable from your understanding of survival. Evening routines are no less structured. Fires are stoked, guards take their positions, and the camp settles into a watchful quiet. Sleep is short but restorative, and even during rest, the mind remains attuned to the rhythms of the environment, the shuffle of footsteps, the distant barking of animals, the occasional call of a sentry. You become acutely aware that vigilance extends beyond wakefulness. It is cultivated in habits, routines, and attentiveness that continue even while others rest. The repetition, once seemingly tedious, has revealed itself as a kind of invisible strength. Soldiers who adhere to schedules, maintain their equipment meticulously, and execute tasks reliably become the backbone of the camp. The Legion's effectiveness is not solely due to battlefield heroics, but to the invisible labor, the mundane tasks, and the discipline cultivated day after day. You begin to see that what historians often overlook, the steady, unremarkable work of maintaining a camp, is what truly sustains empires. Periods of crisis further reinforce these lessons. When supply shortages occur, or when unexpected weather disrupts the daily routine, the disciplined habits developed through months of repetition become the most effective tools for survival. Soldiers move systematically to repair damage, ration provisions, and ensure that critical defenses remain intact. You witness the way small, consistent actions ripple outward, preventing what could have become catastrophic consequences. Again, the mundane proves vital, and the extraordinary is often built on a foundation of ordinary diligence. The camp also teaches subtle lessons about adaptability. While routine is essential, unexpected challenges demand flexibility. Soldiers learn to improvise when tools fail, when terrain changes, or when intelligence about enemy movements proves incomplete. You observe that those who combine discipline with adaptability thrive, while those who cling rigidly to habits alone sometimes falter. Survival in the Legion is thus a balance: adherence to order, attention to detail, and readiness to respond intelligently when routine fails. You begin to understand the psychological endurance required. Days are long, repetitive, and physically demanding. Yet the Legion's structure, the clarity of tasks, and the predictability of consequences provide a measure of stability in a world often defined by uncertainty. The ability to persist, to maintain focus, and to execute tasks consistently emerges as a form of quiet heroism, unremarkable to outsiders, but essential for the survival of the group. Over time, you also notice the cumulative effect of these routines on morale and cohesion. Small gestures of competence, sharpening a sword meticulously, repairing armor promptly, assisting a comrade, foster trust and mutual respect. The Legion becomes more than a collection of individuals. It functions as a collective organism, each part dependent on the reliability of the others. Your own contributions, however minor they may seem, reinforce this interdependence and provide a sense of purpose that transcends immediate discomfort or monotony. The lessons extend beyond physical and social survival. You come to appreciate the value of observation, patience, and the careful cultivation of skills that are not immediately recognized but prove indispensable over time. You realize that the greatest threats are often subtle: a misaligned palisade, a neglected ration, a momentary lapse in vigilance. Mastery in this environment is invisible, but its effects are profound. The Legion survives because its members internalize a system of continuous, uncelebrated diligence. By the end of your first year, or perhaps your second, you have settled into a rhythm that blends discipline with endurance, routine with awareness, and labor with quiet observation. You recognize that the daily life of the camp, with its repetition and structure, is not a limitation, but a framework that shapes competence, resilience, and collective efficiency. Survival is achieved less through dramatic feats of bravery than through the invisible accumulation of small, careful actions performed reliably over time. And yet, despite this mastery, a lingering question remains. The daily grind, the invisible labor, the meticulous attention to duty. These are your tools for survival, but they are also constraints. The Legion operates efficiently because individuality is subsumed into collective routine. Personal initiative exists only within boundaries. Freedom is measured not by choice, but by adherence to structure and the ability to act predictably in a disciplined environment. You arrive at the bustling capital of the Han dynasty, Chang'an, a city that stretches far beyond what your eyes can immediately take in. Streets are lined with merchants, officials, laborers, and travelers from distant regions. all contributing to the rhythm of a civilization that spans millions. At first glance, the city seems chaotic, but there is a hidden order, a system embedded within the movements of its inhabitants. And in the midst of this sprawling urban landscape, you are drawn to one of its quieter, but no less essential engines, the bureaucracy. Your first exposure to the life of a bureaucrat is unassuming. You walk past administrative offices, simple wooden buildings, some open to sunlight, others dark and cramped, where clerks sit hunched over stacks of bamboo slips. You hear the scratching of brushes, the shuffling of papers, and the occasional murmur of an argument over interpretation of the law. It is a world of precision, repetition, and silent labor, designed not to inspire awe, but to maintain the machinery of empire. Here, the work is not glamorous. It is invisible to all but those who depend on it. You are introduced to your immediate responsibilities. As a junior scribe or clerk, you are tasked with recording transactions, copying edicts, and cataloging reports from local officials. Your training emphasizes accuracy above all else. A single mistake could distort tax records, misrepresent a legal decision, or create confusion in the dispatch of orders. The bureaucracy runs on these small, precise actions, and you quickly learn that your role, though seemingly minor, is integral to the empire's stability. Your desk is a low wooden table cluttered with brushes, inkstones, and stacks of bamboo slips. Each slip is inscribed carefully, line by line, using ink that must be prepared precisely. Too thick, and it smears. Too thin, and it fades quickly. You learn to hold the brush with subtle pressure, to control the flow of ink, and to maintain the uniformity of characters. Over time, the very nature of this work becomes both meditative and exacting. One hand follows the other in a rhythm that, after hours of practice, feels almost instinctive. Each stroke carries the weight of bureaucratic responsibility, even if it appears insignificant to outsiders. The clerks around you move in synchronized efficiency. Some sort entries, others deliver messages, and a few review calculations for accuracy. Every slip of paper, every record, must find its place within a vast network of documentation. Errors are corrected meticulously, not by reprimand alone, but through careful instruction in process and procedure. Precision is the currency of survival, and attention to detail is the measure of competence. As the day unfolds, you begin to notice the social hierarchy embedded within the bureaucracy. Senior clerks oversee junior scribes, providing guidance and reviewing work. Their authority is not merely administrative, it is derived from experience, knowledge of the law, and mastery of the subtle rules that govern imperial administration. You observe carefully. When a senior clerk speaks, others respond with respect. Even when they disagree, disputes are rarely loud. They are resolved through careful argumentation and citation of precedents. The lesson is clear. Success depends on understanding not only the mechanics of the work, but also the web of influence, reputation, and decorum that governs interactions. Mid-morning brings interruptions in the form of reports from local magistrates. A bamboo slip arrives detailing a tax collection, a legal dispute, or a military requisition. You are expected to process the information swiftly and accurately, often cross-referencing multiple sources. Mistakes in interpretation could delay payments, create confusion in the courts, or misinform higher officials. Each report carries the weight of countless lives. Farmers who must pay taxes, soldiers awaiting supplies, and citizens seeking justice. Though your actions are small and silent, they ripple outward, sustaining the larger structure of the empire. Lunchtime provides little respite. Meals are functional, steamed, grains, vegetables, and occasionally fish or meat. But the work continues. Clerks eat quickly at their desks, keeping an eye on incoming messages and ensuring that processes do not stall. You learn that efficiency is valued over leisure, and that even short breaks must be balanced against the flow of bureaucratic activity. The discipline required is mental as well as physical. Attention must remain sharp, judgment precise, and patience enduring. Afternoon work involves a variety of tasks: calculating tax obligations, copying decrees for distribution to provincial offices, and preparing documentation for upcoming legal hearings. You notice the repetition in every step. Calculations are verified multiple times, edicts are copied in multiple scripts to reach different regions, and records are stored in strict order. The monotony is deliberate, it ensures accuracy. Every task is a test of endurance, attention, and humility. You begin to understand that the stability of the empire depends on these quiet, unglamorous labors. Observation remains critical. You watch colleagues interact, noting how subtle deference, careful phrasing, and proper posture convey competence and reliability. A minor breach of etiquette, a brusque reply, an overlooked title, or a poorly copied character can mark someone as careless or incompetent. In a system as vast as the Hun bureaucracy, perception is as significant as precision. You begin to learn the delicate balance between completing work efficiently and navigating social expectations with care. Even as work continues, you notice that the bureaucracy itself functions as a kind of living organism. Instructions flow downward from high-ranking ministers to provincial administrators, then to local magistrates and clerks like yourself. Feedback, reports, and clarifications move upward, creating a loop of communication that sustains governance across vast distances. The system is meticulous, slow-moving, and designed for endurance rather than speed. Success is measured not by individual recognition, but by the continued stability of the processes you help maintain. By late afternoon, clerks often review their work for errors, cross-referencing past records, and verifying calculations. Mistakes are corrected immediately. You learn to develop a sense of anticipation, predicting potential errors before they occur, and double-checking results accordingly. The practice is painstaking, yet the satisfaction of completing a day's work without error provides a quiet sense of achievement. The monotony, you realize, is a feature, not a flaw. It trains precision, patience, and resilience. Evening brings another layer of observation. Senior administrators meet to review provincial reports, plan future policies, and discuss potential reforms. While you are not yet directly involved in decision-making, listening and observing these sessions teaches you the subtle art of interpretation. You learn how data, reports, and written communication shape choices at the highest levels. The lessons are both practical and abstract. A clerk who understands process and context becomes indispensable, even without commanding armies or issuing laws. Nightfall offers little release from vigilance. Documents must be stored properly, brushes cleaned, and slips organized for the next day. Clerks may copy additional records, ensure the accuracy of ledgers, or prepare for inspections by inspectors or visiting officials. The work is steady and continuous, but the routines establish a rhythm that fosters endurance. Over time, repetition becomes comforting, predictability becomes survival. The bureaucracy, like the empire it serves, depends on sustained, methodical effort. As you lie in your modest quarters, the day's lessons settle in. The life of a Han Dynasty bureaucrat is not heroic. It is neither glamorous nor celebrated in songs or stories. Yet, it is essential. Without meticulous record-keeping, careful observation, and precise execution, taxes would go uncollected, legal disputes would fester, and imperial commands would fail to reach distant provinces. The quiet labor of scribes and clerks sustains the empire in ways both subtle and profound. And as you drift towards sleep, surrounded by the faint scratch of brushes and the scent of ink and wood, a question lingers quietly, prompting reflection on both your role and the machinery you serve. The life of a Han Dynasty bureaucrat becomes defined less by dramatic events and more by the steady accumulation of work. Each day follows a rhythm that is repetitive yet vital, as if the empire itself pulses through the strokes of your brush and the careful arrangement of bamboo. Slips. By now, the early awe of arrival has been replaced by a deep, almost hypnotic familiarity with the cadence of the offices, the texture of ink, and the subtle social hierarchies that govern interactions. Morning begins as before, with the faint light of dawn filtering into your office through wooden lattices. A clerk ahead of you has already begun the day, the rhythmic scratching of his brush forming a quiet background to the hum of early activity. You rise, prepare your ink, Align your slips and take your place among colleagues who move with an almost mechanical precision. Even as you watch, you notice that mastery of this routine is essential. One misplaced stroke, one miscopied character, could ripple outward, causing confusion in distant provinces, errors in tax collection, or miscommunication with officials overseeing far-flung territories. The morning's first tasks often involve the compilation of reports from provincial magistrates. These reports are not brief summaries. They are meticulous documents detailing land assessments, tax receipts, census data, legal disputes, and military requisitions. Each report arrives in the form of bamboo slips, bound together and carefully labeled. Your task is to verify, transcribe, and organize these records for both immediate reference and long-term storage. The work is slow, deliberate, and, to the untrained observer, monotonous. But it is the very backbone of imperial administration. You notice that even the smallest details demand attention. A slightly smudged character must be corrected immediately. A numerical discrepancy may require consulting a ledger from months prior. You learn to anticipate common errors, cross-referencing multiple sources and checking calculations repeatedly. The repetition, once tedious, begins to cultivate a sense of mindfulness. You move with precision, your brush strokes steady, your eyes scanning for inconsistencies, your mind attentive to patterns. Each small correction is an act of preservation, ensuring that the machinery of the empire continues to function seamlessly. Around mid-morning, senior clerks circulate through the office, inspecting work with quiet intensity. Their presence is both reassuring and intimidating. They offer guidance, correct minor mistakes, and occasionally point out the subtleties of interpretation that can make or break a record. Their authority is grounded not in fear alone, but in experience, meticulousness, and an intimate understanding of imperial protocol. You quickly learn that competence is evaluated through the consistency of your performance, the accuracy of your work, and your ability to navigate the subtle social expectations embedded in every interaction. Lunch is brief, often consisting of simple grains, vegetables, and occasionally small amounts of fish or meat. Meals are eaten at your desk because the flow of work is continuous, and the pace of administration allows little room for indulgence. Conversation is minimal, focused on clarifying procedures, resolving minor disputes, or confirming details. Efficiency, not leisure, governs this time. Even a short break is measured against the potential for errors or delays. In this environment, attentiveness is not merely a virtue, it is a necessity. Afternoons are often devoted to cross-referencing previous records with incoming data. You may need to reconcile tax rolls, check property transfers, or verify census entries. Each slip, each stroke of ink carries weight. Errors can compound over time, leading to misallocation of resources, disputes among citizens, or confusion for military officials dependent on accurate provisions. The meticulous attention demanded is exhausting, yet it is precisely this repetition and care that sustains the vast bureaucracy of the Han Empire. Observation remains crucial. You study your colleagues' methods, noting who is thorough, who is fast but careless, and who demonstrates both efficiency and accuracy. The social fabric of the office is subtle but persistent. Alliances, informal mentorships, and reputation influence the flow of work as much as formal hierarchy. You learn that a well-timed suggestion or a discreet offer of assistance can foster goodwill and trust, while a moment of negligence can isolate you socially as well as professionally. In this context, social acuity becomes inseparable from technical competence. Unexpected challenges arise periodically, testing the systems in place. A misreported census could disrupt tax collection, or a delayed military requisition might force a local commander to improvise in the field. When such issues appear, clerks are expected to respond calmly, methodically, and accurately. Improvisation is permitted only within the constraints of protocol. You notice that these moments, while stressful, reinforce the necessity of discipline, patience, and a deep understanding of procedure. The bureaucracy, like the empire, survives through careful preparation and measured responses to inevitable disruptions. By late afternoon, clerks often engage in the review of older records, ensuring that long-term archives are correctly organized. The work is quiet, deliberate, and slow-moving. Bamboo slips are checked for damage, ink quality, and legibility. Labels are revised and cross-referenced. In a modern sense, this might appear tedious or insignificant, yet in the context of an empire spanning thousands of miles, the reliability of archive data is critical. One misfiled record can affect decisions made hundreds of miles away, impacting lives, resources, and governance. Evening brings another layer of discipline. Supervisors review all completed work, checking for consistency, accuracy, and adherence to protocol. Mistakes are corrected immediately, but the corrections are conducted with patience and care, emphasizing learning and precision over punishment. By now, you recognize that the invisible strength of the bureaucracy lies not in dramatic actions, but in sustained, methodical diligence. The empire thrives because its clerks, often unseen and unheralded, maintain the integrity of information, ensuring that decisions at every level are informed and consistent. Nightfall offers little in the way of leisure. Clerks tidy their workspaces, clean brushes, and organize slips for the following day. The office itself is quiet but alive, with the subtle hum of thought. Colleagues may consult each other quietly, review difficult cases, or anticipate challenges for tomorrow. Sleep is necessary but measured. The demands of the role and the structure of the bureaucracy require readiness and alertness. Over time, the steady repetition becomes meditative, embedding a sense of calm control in an otherwise demanding environment. Through this rhythm of work, observation, and silent endurance, you begin to internalize the lessons of the bureaucracy. Precision, patience, and attentiveness are not just professional requirements. They become tools for mental discipline, shaping how you navigate both your immediate responsibilities and the broader social and political landscape. Every stroke of ink, every slip of bamboo, every careful calculation contributes to a chain of actions that sustain life across a sprawling empire. The work is repetitive, yes, but its significance is profound. And yet, as your days blend into weeks and months, a quiet tension remains. The bureaucracy operates through predictability and consistency, but it is also vulnerable to human error, miscommunication, and the inherent limitations of a system spanning vast distances. Your diligence, however meticulous, cannot guarantee perfection. This awareness, far from discouraging you, sharpens your attention. You understand that survival and competence are measured not by heroic feats, but by the careful accumulation of small, precise actions over time. And as you prepare for rest, in the dim light of oil lamps reflecting off bamboo slips and wooden tables, a question lingers in your mind, subtle but persistent. Time in the Han Dynasty bureaucracy flows differently from the bustling streets outside. There are no dramatic announcements of victory or the cries of battle. Instead, there is the steady rhythm of ink on bamboo, the quiet arrangement of records, and the persistent hum of clerks attending to endless administrative details. Over months and years, you begin to see the full significance of this work. It is not merely labor, but the invisible scaffolding that holds the empire together. By now, you have become intimately familiar with the daily rhythm. Dawn brings the faint light filtering through latticed windows, signaling the start of transcription, verification, and calculation. Midday offers only brief respite as lunch is consumed at desks, with attention always partially on the flow of work. Afternoon brings cross-referencing, correcting discrepancies, and preparing slips for higher offices. And evening demands careful storage, archival organization, and preparation for the next day. This repetitive cycle, initially daunting, has become both familiar and necessary, a meditation in endurance, precision, and vigilance. You have also internalized the social and hierarchical dynamics that govern the office. Senior clerks, with their experience and careful understanding of imperial protocols, have become guides as well as evaluators. They teach subtle lessons, how to phrase communications to avoid misinterpretation, how to anticipate errors, how to maintain composure when confronted with conflicting reports. Junior clerks learn that competence is demonstrated not through visible displays, but through consistency, accuracy, and reliability. The social architecture of the office is as intricate as the bureaucratic systems themselves, with influence determined by reputation and mastery of process, rather than title alone. Your understanding of the technical work has deepened as well. Calculations, once intimidating in their volume and complexity, now feel like a rhythm. Cross-referencing tax records, verifying census data, and reconciling property disputes become exercises in attention and patience. Each accurate transcription, each correction of a minor error, reinforces the invisible structure of governance. You understand at a granular level that even the smallest misstep can ripple outward. Delays in supplies for military units, disputes among peasants, or confusion for provincial officials, but each careful act prevents catastrophe and sustains order. Over time, you begin to notice patterns that connect seemingly mundane records to the larger world. Census data reveals subtle demographic shifts, tax receipts hint at economic trends, property disputes reflect changing social structures. The bureaucracy is more than administration, it is a mirror of society. Every document tells a story, and your role as clerk is not merely to record it, but to ensure that the story is preserved accurately. You recognize that the work, though repetitive and quiet, is profoundly significant. It maintains continuity, stability, and cohesion across a vast, complex empire. The challenges you encounter are rarely dramatic, but they are persistent. Misfiled documents, discrepancies between provincial reports, and the occasional human error demand constant vigilance. You learn to anticipate problems develop, opt procedures to catch mistakes before they propagate, and adapt protocols as needed, all within the rigid structures of imperial expectations. Flexibility within discipline becomes a subtle art, balancing adherence to rules with intelligent, careful judgment. You see clearly now that the strength of the bureaucracy lies in its ability to combine predictability with thoughtful responsiveness. Even social subtleties become part of this learning. You notice the informal mentorships among clerks, the careful exchange of advice, and the silent recognition of skill. Collegial trust becomes as critical as technical competence. Mistakes are tolerated when remedied promptly. Diligence is rewarded through quiet acknowledgement, rather than overt praise. These invisible mechanisms, almost unnoticed by outsiders, sustain the culture of the office and ensure that the machinery of governance operates efficiently. You understand that the success of the bureaucracy depends not only on individual skill, but on the collective reliability and discretion of those who labor quietly within its walls. Nightfall reinforces these lessons. As lamps flicker over organized stacks of bamboo slips, you prepare records for the following day, review calculations one last time, and ensure that everything is in order. The office grows still, but the influence of this work extends far beyond its walls. Decisions about tax collection, land distribution, and legal judgments will be informed by your careful preparation. The empire relies on these unseen acts of diligence to function, to expand, and to endure. In this way, the clerk's labor, often invisible, becomes the lifeblood of the Han administration. You also begin to perceive the psychological resilience required. Monotony, repetition, and the pressure for precision can wear on even the most disciplined mind. Yet the steady rhythm of work, the clear, our expectations, and the incremental sense of accomplishment cultivate a different kind of endurance, a quiet confidence in competence. Here, heroism is measured not in battlefield exploits, but in the accumulation of meticulous, reliable action. The persistence required to maintain this order, day after day, month after month, and year after year, is a subtle but profound strength. By the end of your tenure in the office, the lessons of bureaucratic life crystallize. Precision, patience, endurance, and social acuity are not merely skills. They are the mechanisms by which an empire survives. Your daily acts, invisible to the vast majority of the population, have contributed directly to the functioning of society. The empire's strength, you realize, is not simply the result of armies or emperors, but of countless clerks who recorded, calculated, and organized the flow of information, ensuring that governance extended across mountains, rivers, and deserts with remarkable consistency. And yet, despite this mastery and the quiet satisfaction of competence, a lingering tension remains. The bureaucracy is powerful, but it is not autonomous. Human error, changing political priorities, and the limitations of written communication mean that even the most careful work cannot entirely guarantee outcomes. You recognize that your labor, however essential, is part of a system larger than yourself, one that demands both humility and vigilance. Mastery here is both personal and systemic, a combination of skill, endurance, and attentive participation within a complex, interdependent whole. Finally, as you leave the office or settle into your modest quarters for the evening, you contemplate the broader significance of your experience. The labor of the Hun bureaucrat may appear dull, repetitive, and invisible, yet it shapes the lives of millions. It sustains military campaigns, supports agricultural productivity, mediates legal disputes, and ensures continuity of governance. The empire's endurance depends not on dramatic action, but on the steady accumulation of disciplined effort and the careful attention to seemingly mundane details. You approach the monastery as the first light of dawn brushes the horizon, casting long shadows over the weathered stone walls and moss-covered roofs. The gates, heavy and worn, creak faintly as you push them open. Beyond lies a courtyard that seems still at first, but a closer listen reveals subtle movement, the soft shuffle of feet along cobblestones, the distant clink of metal as a novice tends to his duties, and the faint rustle of robes as monks begin the day's routines. The air carries a blend of earth, smoke from the kitchens, and incense lingering from the previous evening's prayers. You feel a quiet sense of reverence, tempered by the hum of endless labor. The monastery is large but not luxurious. Its size is dictated not by grandeur, but by the practical needs of housing monks, novices, and a small number of servants or lay workers who support the community. Rows of cells line cloisters, each simple but functional, a straw mattress, a wooden desk for copying manuscripts, and a small altar for personal prayer. Windows are narrow and high, designed to illuminate the rooms without allowing excess light to disturb sleep or meditation. You notice that every architectural feature is deliberate, each wall and arch a reflection of centuries of accumulated experience in balancing austerity with utility. The first activity of the day is the canonical hour of prayer, a ritual that begins well before sunrise. You hear the faint chant of psalms carried through the corridors, a rhythm that both awakens and orders the senses. Monks move in measured steps to the chapel, some holding books, others silently crossing themselves. Participation is not optional. The ritual structures the day, providing both spiritual and temporal orientation. Even a casual observer would notice the precision. Who walks ahead, who follows, who carries incense or candles. Each action is rehearsed, repeated daily, reinforcing both discipline and communal cohesion. After prayer, the monks disperse to their assigned tasks. Labor here is not punishment, it is a form of devotion. Some tend the gardens, cultivating vegetables and herbs that will feed the community. Others manage the small flocks of sheep or chickens, collecting eggs, shearing wool, or cleaning pens. A few remain in the scriptorium, copying texts with meticulous attention to detail. You notice the rhythm of work, repetitive, steady, and slow, yet absolutely necessary. Every act, no matter how mundane, contributes to the survival of the monastery and its spiritual mission. Meals are taken in silence, or near silence, in the refectory. Bread, porridge, and occasionally fish or cheese are consumed with minimal conversation. The monotony of food is intentional, reinforcing humility and self-discipline. You watch as each monk eats in measured bites, cleans his utensils carefully, and returns promptly to his work or study. Even the act of eating is integrated into the larger rhythm of communal life, a small but consistent reminder that every detail is meaningful when multiplied over years and decades. You are drawn to the scriptorium, where novices and experienced monks alike sit bent over manuscripts, their hands steady, their eyes focused. Ink, quill, and vellum are tools of immense responsibility. Errors must be corrected immediately. Sloppy work would not only compromise the text, but reflect a lapse in discipline and devotion. Here, repetition is a form of mastery. Each letter copied, each word measured and aligned, is an exercise in patience and end. Endurance. The work is invisible to the outside world, but its significance cannot be overstated. These manuscripts preserve knowledge, culture, and theology for generations beyond the monastery walls. The monastery also maintains a strict schedule of cleaning and maintenance. Courtyards are swept, kitchens scrubbed, and buildings repaired using simple tools and labor-intensive methods. The work is never complete. Dust returns, weeds sprout, and minor repairs accumulate continuously. Yet this constant, mundane labor sustains the monastery's functionality and demonstrates a commitment to order. You begin to see that survival here, both spiritual and physical, relies not on grand gestures, but on meticulous care executed day after day. Observation becomes essential. You note the subtleties in hierarchy. The abbot oversees all activities with a quiet authority, ensuring that discipline is maintained without unnecessary confrontation. Priors and senior monks guide novices through tasks and prayers, correcting gently but firmly when errors occur. A subtle glance, a careful adjustment of posture, a whispered instruction, all convey authority and maintain cohesion. Social survival, much like spiritual practice, depends on attentiveness, humility, and careful navigation of these invisible structures. The gardens, modest but carefully tended, reveal another aspect of monastery life. Vegetables are planted in rows, herbs categorized for culinary or medicinal purposes, and fruit trees pruned according to seasonal knowledge passed down over generations. Work in the gardens is repetitive, slow, and physically demanding, but it is both necessary and meditative. The labor teaches endurance, attention to detail, and the rhythm of natural cycles. You notice the way each monk moves deliberately, coordinating with others to ensure the collective productivity of the space. Survival here is not dramatic, it is a matter of careful cultivation. Evenings bring additional rituals and reflection. The monks gather again in the chapel for vespers, chanting in unison, the sound reverberating through stone corridors. Silence follows, allowing contemplation of the day's work, both spiritual and practical. You notice the interplay of light and shadow, the subtle smell of incense, and the gentle weight of accumulated fatigue. These moments are as structured as the labor itself, integrating mental, spiritual, and physical discipline into a single repeating rhythm. As days pass, you begin to perceive the slow accumulation of decline alongside continuity. Some buildings show signs of wear, roofs sag, stones crack, and wooden beams warp with age and weather. Resources are limited, repairs must be managed carefully and often postponed. Monks ration materials, reuse broken items creatively, and work within constraints that appear minor to an outsider, but are essential for survival. You notice that these small, repetitive decisions, how to allocate labor, which repairs to prioritize, how to stretch limited supplies, determine whether the monastery can endure the coming years. Even more subtle is the human dynamic. Novices struggle with the rigor of labor and prayer. Experienced monks grow weary with the monotony and physical toll of decades of service. Conflicts are minor, but they exist. Disagreements over tasks, allocation of responsibilities, or interpretation of rituals. Resolution requires patience, careful listening, and adherence to precedent. You realize that social endurance is as important as physical or spiritual endurance. Cohesion, after all, ensures that the monastery functions at all. As night falls, the courtyard is quiet. Candles flicker, and shadows stretch across worn stones. Monks settle into their cells, some reading, others writing, most preparing for the first watch of prayer or the dawn ritual. Sleep comes in measured hours, tempered by the expectation of early rising and continuous labor. You notice the faint sound of drafts through old windows, the subtle creak of timbers settling, and the distant hoot of an owl. The monastery exists in cycles of light and dark, labor and prayer, growth and decay. And yet, as you lie on a simple mattress in a small cell, one thought persists, gently tugging at your curiosity. With the passing of months, the rhythm of the monastery settles into a predictable pattern, though predictability does not lessen the intensity of life here. Each day flows into the next with quiet insistence, dawn prayers followed by labor, midday meals, afternoon maintenance, evening rituals, and finally the reflective hours before sleep. You notice that mastery of this rhythm is not simply about completing tasks efficiently, but about internalizing the slow cadence that governs every aspect of life in this cloistered world. The labor, though repetitive, is exacting and unrelenting. Gardens must be weeded carefully. Every plant, herb, and vegetable requires constant attention. Seeds are sown in alignment with seasonal calendars, rows plowed methodically, and irrigation maintained by hand. You observe the monks moving deliberately through the garden, hands dirt-streaked, backs bent, faces weathered by sun and wind. Their movements are slow, precise, and disciplined, a study in endurance. The garden is not simply a source of food, but a living exercise in patience and observation. Each weed pulled, each row straightened, is a small act of control over an otherwise unpredictable world. Inside the monastery, the scriptorium continues its quiet, relentless work. Novices copy texts with painstaking care, while experienced monks proofread and correct errors. The repetition of letters, the precision requie, read for alignment and spacing, and the constant attention to ink consistency all demand sustained focus. You notice that errors are both inevitable and consequential. One miscopied character could distort the meaning of a religious passage or a philosophical text, subtly altering interpretations for generations. This painstaking labor is invisible outside the monastery walls, yet it preserves knowledge, ideas, and traditions that might otherwise vanish. Here, endurance and patience become acts of silent heroism. The kitchen and refectory provide another layer of insight into monastic life. Meals are simple and functional, yet preparing them is a continuous labor. Cooks tend fires, grind grains, and prepare soups or porridges, ensuring that the community is fed efficiently and without waste. The novices assist, chopping vegetables or fetching water, learning through repetition the rhythm of sustenance. Even mundane tasks, cleaning pots, stacking firewood, maintaining storage cellars, are undertaken with care and diligence, contributing directly to the survival and stability of the community. You begin to appreciate the extraordinary importance of ordinary labor. Maintenance of the buildings themselves is a constant concern. The monastery is centuries old, walls crack, roofs sag, wooden beams warp, and tiles fall. Repairs are undertaken methodically, mortar mixed carefully, stones replaced, and wood treated with oils or resins. The work is slow and labor-intensive, and it requires foresight. Resources are limited. A misallocation of materials today could leave the structure vulnerable tomorrow. You notice the meticulous planning that underlies every repair, the subtle prioritization of urgent work over less pressing tasks, and the tireless commitment of those who maintain the monastery's physical integrity. Observation of the social hierarchy within the monastery is EQ, Uli important. The abbot oversees all activities, providing guidance, correction, and sometimes quiet encouragement. Priors and senior monks manage day-to-day operations, ensuring that novices and less experienced monks adhere to both labor and ritual. Authority is rarely enforced through harsh words. It is expressed through careful correction, patient instruction, and the subtle imposition of precedent. Novices quickly learn that respect, attentiveness, and obedience are as critical for survival as physical stamina or spiritual devotion. Social navigation, though understated, is a key component of monastic life. You also notice the accumulation of minor tensions. Some novices struggle to maintain the pace, others chafe at rules they find arbitrary. Experienced monks may grow weary, their hands stiff from years of labor, their eyes strained from constant scrutiny of texts. Disputes are small but persistent, a disagreement over the division of garden work, a debate about interpretation of ritual, or friction over allocation of scarce resources. Resolution requires patience, diplomacy, and careful listening. The endurance demanded by these social subtleties parallels the physical endurance required in daily labor. Survival in the monastery is a balance of body, mind, and spirit, all exercised through repeated attention to detail. The passage of time becomes tangible in subtle ways. Moss spreads further along stone walls, wood darkens with age, and the gardens evolve with each season, marking the slow rhythm of life. You notice that even the human body is affected. Hands roughen, backs ache, and eyesight fades. Yet the community persists, sustained by routine, discipline, and devotion. Each day is an incremental act of preservation, extending the monastery's life against the inexorable march of decay. Evenings are quiet, yet demanding. Vespers bring communal prayer, reflection, and contemplation. Each monk participates, and the shared rhythm of chanting reinforces the cohesion of the group. Silence follows, allowing for individual reflection, reading, or writing. You sense the interplay between the spiritual and the practical. The same discipline that ensures accurate manuscript copying also strengthens the capacity for prayer, observation, and endurance. Every repetition, whether in labor, study, or ritual, becomes a training of body and mind, a rehearsal for continued survival. The long-term pressures on the monastery are also becoming evident. Limited resources, slow accumulation of wear and tear, and the occasional interruption of political or environmental factors all threaten stability. You observe the careful balancing act required. Materials must be rationed, repairs planned with foresight, and labor allocated to both immediate and future needs. This continuous management of scarcity requires foresight, patience, and subtle negotiation within the community. The monk's survival is not just physical, it is a matter of careful, disciplined planning over decades. Through all of this, you notice the quiet endurance of knowledge, manuscripts copied and preserved, gardening techniques refined, repair methods perfected. All these elements form a tapestry of collective memory. The monastery, though slowly aging, continues to function because these routines are internalized, repeated, and refined. Even as the structures themselves begin to show their age, the knowledge embedded in practices and texts ensures continuity. This invisible inheritance is as essential to survival as the walls or the food supply. And yet, as you observe the slow accumulation of both competence and decay, a subtle anxiety lingers. The monastery continues, but the weight of time is relentless. Every repair delayed, every minor error in copying, every lapse in attention threatens gradual decline. You begin to recognize that survival is not a one-time achievement, but a continuous process of incremental labor, careful observation, and disciplined attention. Even the most faithful and dedicated community faces the inevitability of slow erosion over decades. As night descends, cloistered corridors echo faintly with the footsteps of monks returning to cells. Lamps flicker, casting shadows that lengthen and shrink along worn stone floors. You settle on a simple mattress, listening to distant owls, the rustle of straw, and the occasional creak of beams. In the quiet, your mind drifts to the subtle forces shaping life here: labor, devotion, decay, and continuity. You perceive the delicate balance that sustains the monastery, and the effort required simply to maintain equilibrium in the face of relentless time. And in the dim, quiet stillness before sleep, a question surfaces, persistent and unresolvable, teasing the edge of your curiosity. Time within the monastery moves slowly, almost imperceptibly, yet it leaves traces on every stone, timber, and human habit. Decades pass, and the repetition of labor, prayer, and maintenance accumulates, shaping the community as much as it preserves it. By now, you have internalized the rhythms of daily life, the precise cadence of prayers, the measured pace of copying manuscripts, the quiet attention to garden work and building repairs. Life here is defined by continuity, but continuity itself becomes both the source of stability and the measure of vulnerability. The monastery's walls, once crisp and unyielding, now bear the faint signs of age. Moss spreads along corners. The mortar between stones softens, and beams creak with shifts in temperature and weight. Yet these imperfections are not merely signs of decay. They also represent the persistence of careful attention. Repairs have been conducted continuously, even as minor wear accumulated. Every stroke of mortar, every realigned tile, every meticulously tied bundle of firewood has contributed to the monastery's survival. you realize that the building itself is a living record of labor, small, unremarkable, and almost invisible acts, performed consistently over decades. Within the cloisters, the human dimension of decline is subtle but unavoidable. Monks age, hands stiffen, backs ache, and eyesight diminishes. Novices rise to positions of responsibility, gradually absorbing the rituals and routines perfected by earlier generations. Relationships form quietly through cooperation and mutual support, yet the stress of labor, scarcity, and expectation is never far beneath the surface. Even in a community devoted to spiritual practice, human endurance is finite, and careful attention is required not just for survival, but for maintaining cohesion. The scriptorium offers perhaps the clearest evidence of continuity and fragility coexisting. Manuscripts copied decades earlier remain in use, guiding new generations of monks in prayer, scholarship, and ritual. Yet every day, errors and wear threaten this legacy. Ink fades, slips are damaged, and the smallest oversight in transcription can propagate unintended consequences. Corrective work is continuous, uncelebrated, and almost entirely invisible. Here, survival is not dramatic. It is painstaking, cumulative, and quiet. The monastery endures not through moments of heroism, but through the patient repetition of routine. Gardens, too, reveal the interplay of continuity and impermanence. The same plots of vegetables and herbs are tended year after year, yet nature is unyielding. Pests, weather, and seasonal variation impose a constant, unpredictable challenge. Monks respond through observation, adjustment, and patient labor. Small innovations, rotating crops, rife, forcing irrigation channels, pruning trees, accrue gradually, creating resilience in the system. Survival in this microcosm is therefore a blend of foresight, experience, and tireless attention to seemingly mundane detail. Even the social structure reflects this slow, deliberate evolution. Novices who arrived years ago have become senior monks, guiding the new generation with a measured hand. Conflicts, though minor, arise over distribution of tasks, interpretation of rituals, or allocation of limited resources. Resolution is achieved not through confrontation, but through patient negotiation, adherence to precedent, and shared understanding of collective purpose. Endurance, you observe, is not merely physical or spiritual. It is social, woven into every interaction, every subtle negotiation, every gesture of cooperation. Resource management continues to define daily life. Firewood, food, ink, and vellum are rationed carefully. Decisions about allocation are often incremental and deliberate. A loaf of bread divided among many, a small repair postponed in favor of urgent maintenance elsewhere. These choices, though small, accumulate significance over years. They determine whether the monastery can continue to function with the same degree of stability, or whether minor shortages gradually erode its ability to sustain itself. Survival, you recognize, is built on countless small, deliberate acts of foresight and discipline. The passage of time is also evident in the rhythm of ritual. Prayer, chanting, and meditation persist as anchors of daily life, yet even these patterns evolve subtly. A chant may shift slightly in cadence over decades, a practice modified to accommodate the physical limitations of aging monks, or a ritual gesture adapted to preserve coherence and continuity. These adjustments are minor, almost imperceptible, yet they embody the careful balance between tradition and adaptation that enables long-term survival. As the monastery ages, the contrast between external decay and internal order becomes increasingly apparent. Walls crumble at the edges, beams warp under years of pressure, and stone steps wear smooth under countless footsteps. Yet within, the daily routines, prayer, labor, study, and maintenance, continue with a disciplined precision. This juxtaposition emphasizes a quiet truth. Survival does not depend solely on physical structures or grand gestures, but on the persistent, disciplined actions of individuals who embody the monastery's enduring principles. Night brings reflection. You sit in your cell, the faint light of a candle flickering across stone walls and worn manuscripts. The smell of ink, the faint rustle of straw, and the distant coo of doves outside create a quiet, contemplative atmosphere. You realize that the monastery's endurance is not accidental. It is the result of continuous attention, meticulous care, and patient adherence to routine over generations. Each monk, each slip of ink, each carefully repaired roof contributes to an invisible chain that binds the past to the present and the present to the future. And yet, for all this care, the monastery is not immune to time's relentless pressure. Decisions made decades earlier continue to shape the present: which buildings were reinforced, which manuscripts were copied accurately, how resources were rationed and conserved. Small errors, deferred repairs, or lapses in attention can accumulate slowly, threatening the stability painstakingly maintained over centuries. You begin to understand that endurance is not a single achievement but an ongoing process, a delicate balance of attention, labor, and foresight. By the end of the day, the monastery embodies a paradox, both fragile and resilient, decaying and enduring. Physical structures show wear, yet the community persists through discipline, cooperation, and patient repetition. Knowledge, skill, and routine are as vital as stone and timber, forming the invisible scaffolding that sustains life within the walls. You recognize that the monastery survives not because it is unchanging, but because it adapts, persists, and endures in subtle, almost invisible ways. And as you drift toward sleep, the weight of observation and reflection settles gently upon you, leaving one persistent question to linger, unresolved and insistent. You arrive on the outskirts of Orleans in the early spring of 1428, a city already tense with anticipation. The River Loire cuts through the landscape like a ribbon of silver, and beyond its banks, the French defenders prepare for a long, drawn-out struggle. You notice the subtle signs of preparation: wooden barricades reinforced with stones, trenches dug to slow enemy movements, and the rhythmic clatter of hammers shaping makeshift fortifications. Smoke rises faintly from bakeries and kitchens within the city walls, carrying with it the scent of bread and firewood, a mundane but vital reminder of life continuing under pressure. Outside the walls, the English forces establish their siege, encampments spread across fields, organized into separate quarters with command tents, supply depots, and watchtowers. From a distance, it is easy to imagine a chaotic mass of soldiers, but the reality is far more methodical. Each unit has a designated role: archers positioned on elevated ground, infantry arranged to support assaults, engineers constructing siege engines. Even the simplest task, digging a trench or transporting a load of stones, requires coordination, attention to detail, and endurance under uncomfortable conditions. The siege is not won by moments of heroism alone, but by the meticulous execution of repetitive labor day after day. You are introduced to the logistics that sustain such an army. Supplies of food, water, and equipment must arrive regularly, otherwise, morale and survival decline. Cattle and grain are collected, barrels of ale and wine transported, and arms repaired constantly. The camp becomes a hive of unseen activity. Cooks prepare meals over smoky fires, blacksmiths mend armor and weapons, and clerks record inventories. Each detail, seemingly minor, has immediate consequences. A miscounted ration, a broken wheel, or a delayed delivery can affect hundreds of soldiers, compromising the effectiveness of operations far more than the clash of swords ever could. Within the city, French defenders adopt a similarly meticulous approach to survival. Citizens reinforce gates, maintain walls, and dig sally ports. Small, controlled exits for sorties. Soldiers patrol the parapets, watching for signs of English movement. Women and older men carry water to ditches, tend wounded, or repair minor breaches in fortifications. Daily life in Orleans is dominated by the duality of normality and siege. Meals are consumed in haste, work is measured against the threat of attack, and every action is underscored by vigilance. You notice that endurance here is not heroic in the conventional sense. It is patient, repetitive, and unglamorous, yet vital. Observing the city's defenses, you see the subtle interplay between strategy and labor. Archers are rotated regularly to prevent fatigue. Stores of arrows are counted, mended, and replenished. Watchtowers are cleaned, strengthened, and maintained. Engineers inspect damaged walls and prepare reinforcements using earth, wood, and stone. The work is slow, careful, and repetitive, designed not for spectacle, but for survival. You begin to recognize that the rhythm of labor, constant, repetitive, and methodical, is as critical as the skill of the defenders themselves. Beyond the walls, the English siege engines move in predictable but precise patterns. Trebuchets are assembled and tested, trebuchet stones measured and polished, and protective scaffolds constructed to shield crews from defensive arrows. Engineers meticulously measure angles, assess distances, and ensure that the machines can operate continuously. Even in the midst of war, the emphasis is on accuracy, repetition, and attention to minute details. Each small miscalculation could render the entire engine ineffective or even endanger its operators. Inside the city, life continues alongside preparation for conflict. Markets operate with caution, relying on stored grains, salted meats, and preserved vegetables. Children are kept close to the safety of the walls, and the sick are tended carefully, isolated when necessary to prevent disease. You observe that the monotony of daily survival, cooking, cleaning, repairing, patrolling, is punctuated by bursts of acute danger, yet it is the steady, repeated effort that sustains the city far more than heroic charges or dramatic confrontations. Patience, endurance, and vigilance are the true weapons of the defenders. Communication is also a critical, often overlooked element. Couriers traverse the city and its outskirts, delivering messages between commanders, patrolling units, and supply depots. Slips of parchment, sometimes written hastily, contain instructions that must be followed with precision. Misunderstandings can have immediate consequences, from misaligned defenses to wasted resources. Both French and English forces recognize that war is not only fought with swords, but with accurate, disciplined information. Clerks, scribes, and messengers play an invisible but indispensable role in sustaining the conflict. Health and hygiene, subtle yet critical factors, dominate daily routines. Wells are monitored to ensure water quality. Waste is removed from streets and encampments to prevent disease. Basic treatments are administered to those injured or ill. Even minor infections can disrupt the labor force, whether in the city or the besieging army. You notice that careful, repetitive attention to sanitation is a matter of survival, not comfort. Endurance in this environment is measured not by acts of heroism, but by the ability to maintain routine under stress, threat, and fatigue. The monotony of siege life also shapes morale. Soldiers and civilians alike rely on rituals, routines, and predictable cycles to maintain stability. Daily inspections, scheduled meals, assigned duties, and recurring prayers all create a sense of control in an otherwise uncontrollable environment. You observe that psychological endurance, quiet patience, and adherence to repetitive tasks is as essential to survival as skill in combat. Even the most disciplined fighters falter without a structured rhythm to their days. As days stretch into weeks, you notice that minor, almost invisible actions accumulate significance. A poorly repaired gate can become a critical vulnerability. An overlooked cache of provisions can lead to shortages. A mismanaged trebuchet might fail at the decisive moment. Each repetition, measuring, mending, counting, patrolling, builds resilience. The siege is won or lost not only in the clash of armies, but in the countless uncelebrated acts of labor, observation, and endurance that occur long before arrows fly or walls are breached. By late afternoon, activity does not diminish. Defenders reinforce parapets, distribute rations, and inspect walls. Attackers adjust positions, maintain engines, and repair tents. Work is unending, unglamorous, and essential. You observe the rhythm of repetitive, precise effort and begin to appreciate the subtle coordination that sustains both armies. Endurance becomes a matter of repetition, attention, and careful pacing. An invisible backbone supporting every visible action on the battlefield. Evening brings reflection and quiet work. Soldiers clean weapons, repair armor, and organize supplies. Citizens in the city tend gardens, repair homes, and assist the wounded. Silence settles gradually, broken only by the occasional distant shout, the clatter of a cart, or the murmur of conversation. This quiet rhythm, punctuated by minor bursts of activity, continues through the night. Survival, you recognize, depends on observing patterns, maintaining focus, and repeating critical tasks consistently over time. And as night falls fully, you lie within the walls of Orleans or among the tents of the besieging army, listening to the distant lap of the river, the creak of wood, and the faint whisper of wind through hastily erected defenses. You contemplate the quiet, repetitive labor that sustains life in this precarious environment, and realize that war is not only a matter of strategy and heroism, but of mundane endurance, meticulous attention, and patient daily effort. With the siege now firmly established, the city of Orléans settles into a rhythm that is both monotonous and essential. The threat of attack looms constantly, yet most days pass without dramatic events. Life is dominated by repetition. Soldiers patrol the walls, engineers maintain fortifications, cooks prepare meals, and messengers shuttle between the city gates and command posts. Each of these tasks, though seemingly minor, is crucial to the survival of the defenders, and any lapse could have significant consequences. You begin to understand that endurance rather than valor is the defining quality here. The walls themselves are centers of constant labor. Stones shift under repeated strain. Mud and mortar crack with changes in temperature and moisture. Defenders repair these imperfections tirelessly. Small teams of workers carry stones and mortar, patch gaps, and reinforce weak points. The work is painstaking, often done in silence except for occasional instructions. You notice that this repetition, day after day, shapes not only the fortifications but the minds and bodies of those maintaining them. Muscle memory, attention to detail, and the ability to work under fatigue are honed through the monotony of consistent, necessary labor. Attention to supply chains becomes a critical aspect of endurance. Inside the city, food stocks are carefully monitored. Grain must be ground into flour, bread baked, and meat rationed with precision. Water is fetched from wells and stored in barrels for emergency use. Every ration is counted, every loaf carefully portioned. Beyond sustenance, fuel for cooking and fires to keep warm is allocated meticulously. You realize that survival does not depend solely on bravery in battle, but on the quiet, disciplined work that ensures everyone is fed, clothed, and sheltered. Neglecting these seemingly dull tasks could quickly lead to chaos or compromise the city's ability to withstand a prolonged siege. The soldiers themselves adapt to the repetitive rhythm of their defensive duties. Archers rotate positions along the battlements to prevent fatigue, maintaining vigilance for long hours. Infantry patrol the walls and parapets, inspecting gates, reinforcing barricades, and ensuring that every section of the wall is secure. Even minor lapses, an unpatched hole, a misaligned gate, or a gap in observation, could be exploited by the besiegers. The routine, though tedious, is a necessary mechanism for survival. Each repetition, each inspection, reinforce both physical and mental preparedness, ensuring that the city can respond efficiently when danger does arrive. Outside the walls, the English siege operations follow a similar pattern. Trebuchets are checked and repaired, ramps constructed and strengthened, and trenches dug with painstaking care. Engineers must calculate distances, assess the durability of materials, and adjust machines based on daily observations. Every launch of a stone is preceded by hours of preparation, maintenance, and calculation. You notice that the apparent action of the battlefield, the arcs of stones and the clash of forces, is only a small fraction of the total effort. Survival, for attackers as well as defenders, is a matter of constant repetitive work, attention to detail, and careful timing. Within the city, civilians play a surprisingly critical role. Women, children, and older men assist with tasks that directly influence the defender's capacity to resist. Water carriers, food preparers, and repairers of minor damage perform work that is monotonous, physically demanding, and yet vital. You notice that this labor, often overlooked in heroic narratives, is essential to maintaining morale, efficiency, and functionality within the besieged walls. Survival is a collective endeavor, dependent on thousands of small acts repeated consistently over weeks and months. Observation and intelligence are another key element of endurance. Scouts watch the enemy camps, noting positions of siege engines, troop movements, and supply lines. Couriers carry these observations back to command, where officers analyze patterns, anticipate next moves, and adjust defenses accordingly. Even the smallest oversight could lead to disaster. A misreported troop position, an overlooked trench, or a neglected weak point could give the attackers an advantage. The monotony of observation, the repeated scanning of enemy positions, the careful comparison of maps and notes, is a silent but crucial form of labor. The psychological weight of this repetition is subtle but persistent. Every day brings the tension of anticipation, the dread of an assault, and the monotony of labor that is both essential and unrelenting. Sleep is limited, exhaustion accumulates, yet the routines, though repetitive, provide a framework for coping with stress. Soldiers rotate, teams take turns repairing walls, and work is distributed to prevent total fatigue. The repetition is not merely a practical necessity, it is a mechanism for maintaining mental and physical stability under extreme pressure. Health and hygiene remain continuous concerns. Disease, injury, and malnutrition can undermine even the best prepared defense. Wells are cleaned, waste is removed, and the sick are isolated. Wounds are treated with careful attention, and even minor infections are monitored to prevent widespread problems. These tasks, though unremarkable, are essential. You begin to see that in a siege, survival is dictated not only by force of arms, but by the relentless attention to mundane, necessary details. Communication is equally vital and painstakingly managed. Messages must be delivered accurately between commanders, patrols, and supply depots. Orders are transcribed, reviewed, and checked multiple times to avoid misunderstandings. A misread instruction could redirect troops incorrectly, misallocate supplies, or leave a section of wall undefended. The process is slow and methodical, yet it ensures cohesion and functionality across the city and even between allied regions outside the walls. The siege also magnifies the importance of routine work as a measure of morale. Soldiers and citizens alike take comfort in predictability. Scheduled patrols, regular meals, repeated prayers, and familiar labor provide a psychological anchor amid uncertainty. Even the dull repetition of mundane chores, the sharpening of blades, the repair of wooden barriers, the daily cleaning of streets, serves as a subtle defense against despair. Endurance, both physical and mental, is cultivated through this deliberate, patient repetition. As weeks pass, the siege shows no signs of dramatic resolution. Yet every day, the invisible accumulation of effort continues. Walls are reinforced, siege engines adjusted, water and food rationed, and watch posts maintained. Small successes, preventing a breach, repairing a collapsed section of wall, or correctly distributing provisions, have an outsized impact on the city's capacity to endure. You notice that the siege is less about singular heroic actions than it is about the slow, careful accumulation of competence and attention over time. Nightfall provides a brief reprieve, yet even then work continues quietly. Patrols maintain vigilance, minor repairs are conducted under lantern light, and messengers prepare for early morning departures. The quiet repetition, the continuous effort, and the careful observation form the uncelebrated backbone of survival. The city persists because of these repetitive, invisible acts, not because of dramatic confrontations or sudden victories. And as you settle into the dim glow of a candle-lit room or the shadows of a tent, listening to the distant ripple of the Loire, the faint clatter of tools, and the occasional shout from a sentry, one thought lingers persistent.